Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Unchurned. I'm Josh Schachter, founder and CEO of UpdateAI and host of Unchurned. And joining me today, I'm especially excited to be speaking to James Manderson. James is the Senior Vice President of Global Customer Success at Braze. Braze is helping to power customer-centric interactions between consumers and brands in real time. One of the leading marketing platforms out there in SaaS. And James is going to tell us a little bit more about Braze. James, thank you so much for being on this episode.
Thanks, Josh. Great to be here.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yep. So as you said, we're at Braze here to help connect brands to their customers. We're all about helping them understand how their customers are interacting with them and then communicating with them in their own channels in real time. Really trying to help brands kind of recreate that, mum and pop store kind of conversation with their customers, but at the scale of tens, hundreds of millions of users.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, but what you just said, I still let's say I don't know about Braze as a listener of the show. You didn't tell me what you actually do, like specifically, James. I like that's like
Sure.
right, like the number one thing. Like let's what are the key use cases of Braze for the minor few that may not know about Braze already?
Sure. So, as I say, we do help our customers understand how their customers are interacting with their digital products, their websites, their apps, and so on. And then we help them communicate with them using messaging, both inside those owned properties, but also using things like email, SMS, um, push messaging, etc. And we help them automate all of that in a very personal, very real time fashion.
Great. So we're talking about triggers, behavioral triggers, monitoring, and then being able to push out corresponding messages across omni-channel platforms. Is that basically in a nutshell?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And importantly understand whether those are working or not. Experiment, test, iterate.
Now, Braze is a public company. I didn't know that until you and I were prepping for this call. You've got 1,500 employees thereabouts, uh,
Mhm.
about 180 in the customer success department, if I'm getting that correct. And it wasn't always the case. You've been
That's
at
right.
Braze for just over 6.5 years. And so we'll talk about some of that history. So we'll go more into Braze, into the setup of CS at Braze. First, I want to get into the segment that I love to warm up the relationship a little bit. Go unchurned, go raw, authentic for a second. I have two questions for you. The first is, James, where were you born and where do you live now?
Sure. I was born in Hammersmith in London, for those who are familiar with London. And I grew up around there and around southeast London. I now live on the coast in Brighton, about 40 miles outside of London.
Beautiful. And who is someone in your career? Because you've got a lot of people that look
Mm.
up to you. You've got a big domain at Braze. Who is someone that you've looked up to, whether or not you've known them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the list is long of people I admire and look up to, both people I've worked with, people who I work with today and in the past, and as you say, others. I think someone who was really transformational for me is one of my first ever bosses when I worked for a charity that helped fundraise for the National Health Service over here in the UK, doing similar sort of CRM customer engagement stuff. Her name was Jude, and I really think she helped me understand, what I wanted from my career, but also, where my skills lay and where they didn't, and to become sort of a little bit more comfortable than I previously had been with the areas where my skills don't lie.
Well, then let me just say, hey, Jude. uh, I couldn't resist. I won't go starting nah. um, so that's wonderful. James, you've been with Braze for 6 years and 8 months at the
Mm,
time of our recording this episode in early Q1 2023. Um, and you've gone in that time from being a lead to general manager to GM and VP of customer success to global VP, and now you're senior vice president of global customer success. And so I want to talk a little bit about that evolution. Tell us a little bit about what Braze looked like and what the setup of customer success looked like when you first joined back in 2016, I believe.
Sure, yeah. It feels like both a tremendously short and a tremendously long time ago. Um, at Braze, back then, the company in total was, I'm not quite sure exactly how many, but probably around 150, somewhere between 150 and 200 people. Um, Customer success was a pretty undifferentiated post-sales role at the time, covering technical support, customer success, documentation, sorts of other bits and bobs. There was probably about 15 to 20 people in the team, mostly based in the US, and there were two people outside the US when I joined as the third non-US based post sales member of the Braze team. I should also add that back then we were called AppBoy, which I think we're all very glad is no longer the case.
Agreed. Okay, cool. So, and then where, tell us about like where you are today. What does that same setup look like?
Yeah, that's right. So as you mentioned, we're north of 1,500 people globally now. The CS team is about 180 people. We have over that time become a much more sort of specialized post sales team in general. Um, what happened over that time is as we started to gain expertise, gain scale. We started to sort of specialize our roles a little bit. So we spun up an onboarding team to work specifically with our newer customers, help them get integrated up and running, and spun that out of CS. And we did similar things with other post sales functions. What that means is that today we're able to wholly focus on ensuring that our customers get a good return on their investment in Braze. Obviously, their financial investment, but also their investment of time. So we're really there to help understand their business case, understand what it is they need to achieve, work as really a sort of add-on to their business, help them understand their place in the market and really how to develop their strategies, develop use cases, execute them in Braze, and get a good return on that investment.
So at first, it was one cluster of a post sales group, right? And now, like you said, you've started to segment out, of course, your customer base, but also the specialize the team as well. And I'm sure there's other
That's
CS
exactly it.
leaders that are listening right now that want to like they're going to go through that. They're either going through that now or in the future they hope to go through that, right? That
Mm,
growth and the need to start to branch out.
mm.
So what did that look like? What were some of the initial signals, if you can recall, that said, oh, you know what, we need to start to branch out?
I think one of the things that we spotted was the sort of the increasing pain of context switching. So in a fairly undifferentiated role, there are times of, and this will always be the case when you're working with a book of business as we do in customer success. But there are times when some of your customers are going to have high peaks of demand on your time and need your support, and times when they'll have sort of lower expectations and needs. If you're working very sort of cross-functionally as a single person doing lots of post-sales things, what you'll find is that those peaks and troughs become pretty unmanageable. And context switching between the customer who's getting up and running needs a tremendous amount of your time so that they can understand what they need to do, troubleshoot, get integrated, etc. Is going to unfortunately detract from the experience of somebody who's more established, but has equally important needs and things they need to do. So that first sort of context switching pain, and I think we felt it in the team, I'm glad to say, before our customers felt it, or at least before they told us about it in a meaningful way. But yeah, certainly that was a real flag. And then I think what we found as well is, as the team got a little bit bigger, we were able to better understand the range of sort of natural aptitudes and skills that folks had within the group, and start to move towards giving people the opportunity to make the most of those sort of natural aptitudes, whether you may be a little bit more technical or better, stronger on the sort of stakeholder management side, or perhaps stronger on the marketing strategy side, and start to kind of, you know, place time and effort in a way that was a bit more aligned to those skills.
And what is so you mentioned onboarding specialists. What's the composition
Mm.
right now of the different functions that you have within your overall purview of customer success?
Yeah, sure. So in CS, we we are actually all CSMs in CS, apart from an operations team and a small consulting group. What we do is we structure ourselves around the size of our customers, starting from our smaller sort of small to medium business customers, um, where CSMs will have a book of more customers going right up to our sort of global strategic accounts where, actually the ratio is going to flip and one customer will have several CSMs working for them around the world. In terms of the other functions, we actually put those into a group. We refer to that as services. I know that's organized differently in lots of places. And that consists of our onboarding team, our technical support team, and a couple of other specializations we have there on the sort of more technical account management side of the house.
Any key tips in terms of keeping those different functions aligned and all operating on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to establish sort of roles and responsibilities and make it clear who's accountable to who, and that includes who's accountable to the customer and who owns that accountability to the customer. I also think it's really important to think about incentivization, and consider how you're incentivizing those different groups, in terms of the makeup of their PBC or comp, or however you organize that as a business, to ensure that whilst people are focused on the thing that's most important to their role, they also have that broader view, and are incentivized to work collaboratively. I also think, thirdly, culture is incredibly important in ensuring that people are pulling together in the same direction.
Would you be able to elaborate on what you just mentioned around the different incentive plans that you have there?
Yeah, I can do a little bit. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think, there are some components, of incentive plans that are, quite particular to certain roles. So, for example, in onboarding, something like time to value, how short can we get the time between when the customer commences with us and when we get them up and running in whatever that meaningful milestone might be for your business. At the same time, broadly, it's important to also incentivize on things like, retention. So gross net retention, whatever's right for your business, which helps to balance having the sort of short view and the long view. We employ some mechanisms like company score to translate that thing across groups. But I think that mix is important. We also think it's quite important in some but not all roles to have an OKR component there, to account for, not the day job kind of project work that folks might be getting deeper into.
You mean the stuff on the side that they're exploring to enrich their own career development?
Exactly right, but also to push us forward as a group. We're lucky in such a large group. We've got a tremendous amount of knowledgeable individuals, and obviously want to make sure we're sort of capturing all their great ideas and moving on the ones that are right to move on.
So how do you do that?
So we kind of create a structure where we have company OKRs and department OKRs. Those roll down to teams, and then at that point, it's a manager's discretion how they decide, um, individuals within their group are gonna contribute to those. We then do our level best, and it's hard, to capture that good work through things like showcases, making sure our ops team are keeping an eye on things. We also, as people build sort of content collateral, things like that, we try to keep an eye on analytics. How much is this being used? How much is it being read? Do we then want to scale it to the group? But I won't pretend that that's, something that I believe we do perfectly.
It
I
sounds like
still
that's
I still
next level.
regularly come. Yeah, exactly. I still regularly come across things that I've not heard of that the team are doing, and I think, wow, that's great. Why is everybody not doing that?
Yeah. Sometimes it's the loudest voices. So let's talk about your own growth personally in the past
Mm.
nearly 7 years. I know you were managing fairly large teams prior to Braze, but your domain did go from managing two to around 180.
Yeah.
And I suppose you kind of stepped down in some sense, right, of what your management um, size was when you went to Braze from what you had previously had.
Mm.
So first, what like why? You must have seen something or had some
Yeah, yeah.
bigger plans in moving over to Braze. So that's the first question. And the
Mm.
follow up is, yeah, like what have you learned from going from 2 to 180 at Braze?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, to take the first question, I first of all, I was really genuinely impressed with the technology. Um, Having worked kind of client side as user of technologies, in the same space as Braze, going back quite a long time to far before anything even remotely as technologically advanced as Braze was available, and databases came on floppy disks. But yeah, I was tremendously impressed by the technology. I also had some personal relationships with some of the folks who had joined the business, and through getting a deeper look at the technology and through starting to meet some of the people who I knew were going to be involved in the leadership or were already involved in the leadership of the business, I thought, this is really worth a go, and I think I felt I, even if it had not panned out the way it had, I think I would have really, always regretted not making the choice to try and have a go. Prior to Braze, I was most recently at Universal Music, so obviously a very large, very stable business. But yeah, I would have regretted not making the move, and I think that was a big part of the calculus.
So SaaS startups
Um,
are a bit more dynamic. You know you're going to grow. You're going to learn. You know it's going to there's going to be you're going to bite off more than you can chew at certain points in time. So
right.
what did you process? What have you processed in the last 7 years?
Yeah. I mean, a lot. I think the thing that I would say has been most important, um, has been, being in this lucky position where there's tremendous talent around me. I'm really lucky. I've got a tremendously strong leadership team. There are people in the department who have been at Braze as long and longer than me, um, and have a real wealth of knowledge, um, and are a great sort of trusted kind of support network for the department. In addition to that, obviously, one of the great things about the pace of growth we had is that constant inflow of new talent and new ideas. And I think sort of harnessing those things is really important. Sort of generally speaking, I'm a big believer in that sort of leader as servant approach. We all know what's got to get done, and it's important that it does. But there's just a tremendous amount of talent and knowledge around, and I think if you can identify the people and the ideas, and help them flourish, that generally results in at least some level of success.
Braze's president Miles Klieger is
Mm.
also the CCO, the Chief Customer Officer, and so what I'd like to know is presumably that means that CS through yourself and through Miles has a seat at the table all the way up to the most senior ranks of
Mm.
the company. And I'd like to understand how that's helped.
Mm. That's exactly right. We made, actually, as a business, and certainly I think this has been really helpful in our success. We made an early investment in customer success, which is also why a lot of the other post sales functions sort of span out of the department over time, um, because succeeding in doing customer engagement well obviously requires tremendous technology, but it also requires help and guidance. And I think one of the things that we've succeeded in doing over the years is really helping our customers sort of shape what their internal teams look like, how they actually work together, as well as how they use the technology. um and that's something that the leadership of the company believed really, really early. It was actually called out in a lot of our the materials that were written about us when we went public, that early investment. And I think, that's paid dividends for us, because having somebody or some group of people that care deeply about your customers and spend time with them and really understand what they're trying to achieve, I think is sort of beneficial for the organization at large. And that's definitely something that, I think we have benefited from.
James Manderson, we'll keep it there. Thank you so much for being on this episode of Unchurned.
Thanks very much for having me, Josh. Great pleasure.